Shavua Tov.
Shabbat Tov, Miriam, good to see you.
How are you?
Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem. Very busy. I'm a chaplain, for Neshama. Neshama is it's an organization called for Jewish chaplain.
Yeah.
Chaplaincy, spiritual care, and they give you phone number, your Zoom, and you give pastoral care through Zoom to family.
Oh, that's really nice.
What I do most of the day, most of the evenings, and
wow.
Yes, and after you debrief with other colleagues, and I have a mentor from the Methodist chaplain Janet Martin, and
right.
A very good relationship with her because she happens to be a Jewish person who found
right.
That Reform Judaism was not spiritual enough for her. So she found evangelical Christianity to be more spiritual, fulfilling.
Mm-hmm.
But she still loves very much Judaism. And the more she learns about Christianity, the more she wants to learn. So she ministers to the Jews as well, because she buys Sidurim, she tries to learn Hebrew. When she's
That's interesting.
Yeah. And I don't try to tell her about Judaism at all. No, because
it's tricky.
She's a woman who could be, I believe in her 60s, and I don't want to, she, Baruch Hashem, she has children, she raised grandchildren, she's raised them in Christianity, and she has only daughters and granddaughters. I guess all of them are Jews, but they found their balance. They find their balance. And they have a spiritual life. They are good people. They speak about God all the time. They quote the Bible. They are aware when there is a Jewish holiday. So it's not. I'm sure she eats matzah on Passover. Because she does the Passover in hospitals when she ministers.
Right.
So I don't want to prove her wrong. What I do, I try to show her the beauty of Judaism. For example, when I was at the Methodist, I taught Mishlei. I taught the Proverbs.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know. I never learned Mishlei.
Right.
So I prefer to teach something I've never learned, so that it gives me as a rabbinical student, I should have learned Mishlei. And the truth is, it was not easy. Mishlei is not easy, but I enjoyed it.
I haven't learned it, so I wouldn't be able to tell you.
I recommend it. Go slowly, it's thick. Go slowly, even if it's one chapter every month, whatever.
Yeah.
One chapter. It is actually very literary. There is a certain literary to it. Yes. You see the beauty of how Ruth, the book of Ruth, is very literally crisp and simple. You agree? The Hebrew of Ruth is very crisp and simple, both from the vocabulary and the style and the syntax, and it's really the beauty of this agrary story. So Mishlei is quite rich in the scope of vocabulary, in the alliteration and the allusions, and even the complexity. And there is a lot of contradiction. One verse contradicts the other. and that's why even that's what it makes it a very Jewish books.
Right.
Because there is one proverb who would say something, and another proverb sometimes adjacent would say the contrary. And it makes it beautiful because you have to resolve, and you could say this is true and this is true. You know what I mean?
Right.
I don't know. You could say, ça sert à rien de faire des économies de bout de chandelle. And you can say, il n'y a pas de petites économies, les petits ruisseaux font les grandes rivières.
J'aime bien ce genre de truc, moi.
And the truth is, both are true. There is truth in both. In aphorism, you can find aphorism in both truth. So because it's about human experience. It's not about theoretical truth that Hashem dvacha nitzav b'shamayim. Dvacha, not dvarecha, dvacha, because we believe in ultimate truth. we're not postmodern. We believe in plural expression and experiences, but it's Vacha Nimtza Bashamayim. Hello, Eliezer.
Hi everyone,
Shavua
Shavua
Tov.
Tov.
Shavua Tov.
Hello, Hanan.
Hello, Hanan.
You name myself. Now I have sound. Hello everyone, Shavua Tov.
Shavua Tov.
Shavua Tov.
Hey, thank you all for making it. An exciting daf, even though Shabbos just ended. We're up to a new parak, daf Nun Zayin. I think I have the right spot. So again, as usual, please tell me if it's not loud enough for, I still don't, I'm not very good at this, it's the truth. I have to do it all the time, but none at all. So this is a new parak, and the parak is called B'ma Isha Yotza. What can a woman go out with on Shabbat, and what can she not go out with? Now, there's several anomalies that have to be pointed out here. One is, later on in the parak, I assure you, we're going to ask what a man can go out with. So this is not particular to women, just so no one's worried about that. But more interestingly, some of the Mefarshim are bothered that the last parak was called B'ma Behema Yotza. And while it seems a little bit strange to discuss animals before you discuss people. So, I think the best answer, or not best, a good answer revolves around the fact that if you recall in the last parak, a lot of it was not just what an animal can wear on Shabbat, but what you can put on an animal before Shabbat and they can still go out with on Shabbat. And so because with an animal, many of the things had to do not only with what you could put on them on Shabbat, which was more limited, because you're not allowed to lean on the animal on Shabbat or rest on it, but even what you do before Shabbat. And it was part of sort of the, remember our whole Masechet starts with getting ready for Shabbat, so to speak. And what you have to do to prepare to cook before Shabbat, to the Madlikin before Shabbat, to prepare. And so with the animal, it had more to do with what you had to do before, leading up to Shabbat. With the people, woman who we're going to start with, but then the man, which we'll get to, it has to do more with what you can put on Shabbat. The Tiferet Yisrael in the Mishnah has a different shot where he says, I saw this in the Kahati at least, I didn't read it inside, that animals usually get up earlier than people. So that in the morning, it's more likely the animals are going out before people are going out. So that's why we talk about animals before people. At least that's the version that I read in the Kahati. I didn't read it inside, I'll admit. So,
and then women get up before men too?
Yeah, I don't think he says that, but that's a very good, fair enough. Men are sleeping in.
Also, maybe women are carrying more things going out than men. I mean, maybe it's more common.
So we'll see. I don't think so. I think he talks about the animal and human, right? Not men and women. But we're going to see. So I'll go through it now before we read the Mishnah. Remember that the principle we talked about with the animals a week ago, or for that's what it was that an animal, you have to rest your animals on Shabbat. You have to rest yourself. A woman here is independent in the sense that she's in charge of her own carrying, and a man in charge of his carrying. Things that are considered to be clothing, a beged, is permitted on Shabbat. You can go out with that on Shabbat. Things that are decorative, you probably can go out with on Shabbat. We're going to discuss some of that nuance in this parak. Things that are unnecessary, that serve no function, are considered what's called a masui, a load, a burden. And you're not allowed to go out with that in Reshut HaRabim on Shabbat. Our Mishnah is entirely discussing things that you really can go out with on Shabbat. They're all decorative. So none of them are prohibited. The only issue is that the Chachamim were very concerned that people would go out with things on Shabbat and would take them off and walk with them. And so everything in our Mishnah that's prohibited is something that we're worried that you're going to take off and show to somebody else. And so that's where I think the gender part is that, the first things we talk about are things we're worried a woman will take off, let's say, her jewelry and show it to her friend or show it to someone and then walk 4 amot holding on to that. So everything in our Mishnah is also only midrabanan because we're worried you're going to take it off and walk with it. And they're all things that by definition, or at least by Chazal's definition, are things that you're likely to take, or not likely, but possible to take off. What are they? So let's read the Mishnah. What can a woman specifically go out with and not go out with? Women shouldn't go out with strings of wool that were sort of decorative, right? So you dyed these strings and you put them in your hair, let's say. Well, I'll get there in a second. The lo b'chutei pishtan, and not with strings made out of pishtan. Pishtan is flax, which is a little bit less pliable than wool, according to the Gemara. I don't know that much about these things, but it's not as absorbent. But either way, they would use it as string, as and make into decorative things. The lo b'ritzuot, and not with strands of. We'll see what this ritzuot are in the Gemara, but ritzuot sheberosha. Rashi says this means all of them. All of these things on her head, she can't go out with again because, and we'll see in the Gemara, because it's possible that she'll take it off and then walk with it. V'lo titvol mehem. And furthermore, a woman who needs to go to the mikvah because she's, a nida or for whatever reason, and has a decorative thing in her hair, she shouldn't go into the mikvah ad sheterafim, until she loosens them. Because you're not allowed to have a chatzitza, you're not allowed to have a separation between the person and the mikvah. And if it's too tight, it will prevent the water from touching her hair. So she should loosen it. She doesn't have to take it off, but she has to loosen it so that water can get between that and her hair. The Gemara is going to ask what that has to do with anything. Further, back to Shabbos. The lo b'totefet, the woman shouldn't go out with a totefet. We'll discuss in the Gemara what all these things are, but they're mostly hair implements. The lo b'sar bitim, bisman she'inant furim, when they're not sewn into either your hair or your hat, meaning they're loose, and then they can come out, and then you'll carry them. The lo b'kavul, you shouldn't wear a kavul, and again, we'll discuss in the Gemara what a kavul is, but let's assume it means a hat of some sort, into a reshut harabim. Now, Rashi understands that a kavul is the only thing that we're saying reshut harabim, and that you can wear a kavul. Again, I'm telling you it's a hat, but we'll see in the Gemara it might not be in a reshut hayachid, in a chatzar. And everything else in the Mishnah you can't even go into a chatzar with. Why? There's no problem with carrying in a chatzar. But it says Rashi because the Chachamim were gozer that if you wear a hat, a strand in your hair into the chatzar, you'll walk into a reshut harabim. That's Rashi. Rashi reads it that way. Rambam disagrees and says that this is referring to everything. That everything in the Mishnah is referring to only reshut harabim, but you could certainly wear it in a chatzar. Continues the Mishnah. The lo be'ir shel zahav. You can't wear they had these decorations you would wear that had a etching of a city of gold on it. Rashi, some say Yerushalayim. Rashi does not say that. The lo be'katla. We'll see what all these are in the Gemara. Not with the katla. Sounds like it's going to kill someone. Lo be'nizamim, which are nizamim are rings, I think nose rings. Lo b'tabat, and not with you can't go out on Shabbat with a ring. She'ein ala chotem, even if it doesn't have a seal. We'll see later if it has a seal, it's even worse because then it's something that's used. It's considered a load, a masoi. But a tabat she'ein ala chotem. Again, we'll discuss this on the Gemara. Lo b'machat she'ein nikuvan, you can't go out with a needle even if it doesn't have a hole. V'im yatzat, but if you go out with any of these things, eino chayevet chatat, you don't have to bring a chatat because, as I said in the beginning, none of these are really considered carrying on Shabbat because they're all things that are decorative, that they look nice on you. And the reason that they're prohibited is not because it's carrying, but because we're afraid that it's going to fall off your clothing, or you'll take it off your clothing to show to someone, and then you'll walk with it in your hand. And if you walk with it in your hand for 4 amot, then you're over an Isser Doraita of carrying, and so therefore the Chachamim made a takana. That's the mission. Says the Gemara, the obvious question, Tefillah, man dechar shma. Who mentioned Tefillah? What does going to a mikvah have to do with Shabbos? Right? Or as Rashi puts it here in his famous formulation, Ma inyan Tefillah, Eitzel Hilchot Shabbos. Right? It says by Har Sinai we're going to have coming up. Right? So Amr of Nachman, Rayitzak Amr Baravua, Ma Tam Kam. The Mishnah is giving you the explanation. What's the reason? Ma Tam, what's the explanation that we just said? Why do we say a woman should not go out with strands that are, again, they were probably, I just want to make clear, they would dye these strands, right? It wasn't, you just had wool hanging from your hair. Or you had red or purple or whatever. It would be something colorful. Why shouldn't a woman go out with these strings of tzemer or pishtin tied to her hair? Because of the next halacha. During the week, it's true on Shabbos too, but during the week, lo titvol behem, you shouldn't go with them into a mikvah ad sheterafim until you loosen them. And kivan debichol lo titvol behem ad sheterafim. Since during the week, if you're going to the mikvah, if a woman's going to the mikvah, she has to loosen these strands. B'Shabbat lo tetzei. she also shouldn't go out with them on Shabbat because maybe she'll have to go to the mikvah. Doma mitrami le'tfila shel mitzvah. It'll turn out she has this thing tied on her hair, right? And I assume, though I don't know much about women's hair, that they would tie them on not every day. You know, you would tie this on for a long period of time. You would do your hair, right? And so this could stay on for 2 weeks. And it could be that the woman would have this tied to her head or her hair, and she'd have to go to the mikvah, would turn out on Shabbos. And then because she has to loosen them to go to the mikvah, sharyala, she'll untie it. So it does sound a little bit far-fetched to me, but that's what the Mishnah's explanation is, that since these are things that if a woman had to go to a mikvah, she would have to untie and loosen. She might, if she was wearing them on Shabbat and had to go to the mikvah, carry them. And therefore, we just made a blanket takana. It's against Gzerim Drabanan. It's only Drabanan that a woman cannot go out on Shabbat with these things. Now, Ba'amine, Rav Kahana mirav. Rav Kahana asked Rav a very practical question. Let's say you have tiki chalilti mai. What if you have tiki chalilti? So what does that mean? Rashi says they're referring to sharsharot, so chains, right? Of chutin chalulot v'agulot. They're these little round, it's like a woven design, basically. I don't know if someone has English, I could do better on these words than me, but essentially it's a kind of woven decoration that you would put in your hair. So can you put those in your hair on Shabbat? Okay? My. Amalei, so Rav answered Rav Kahana, arig ka'amrit. You're talking about something that's arig, that's woven together, right? These strands are all woven together. Kol shehu arig lo gazru. Anything that's woven was not gozer by the Rabbanan. The reason is that things that are woven are loosely attached together, and the water gets into it easily. And so if a woman was going to a mikvah, she would not have to untie this thing, because it's not tightly bound. And therefore, if she doesn't have to remove it when she goes to the mikvah, you can go out with it on Shabbos, because you're not worried that she's going to untie it. And Itmar Nami, in fact, we said that very clearly. Amar of Huna, Breder of Yeshua. Kol shehu arig, any, again, this is any hair, decoration that's woven, not stitched together, let's say, or not tied together, lo gazru, the Rabbanan were not gozer. And so it's mutter. Ikadami, now some said, Amar Rav Huna Breder of Yeshua, Rav Huna Breder of Yeshua did not say it that clearly. What he said was, Chazina lachvati lo kaptin alayu. I saw that my sisters, I think achvati are my sisters, right? I saw that my sisters, lo kaptin alayu, they were not makbid to untie these things from their hair when they went, to take a shower or to the bath. I guess they didn't have showers that much, but baths, right? So basically, that Rav Huna Breder of Yeshua said that these kind of woven things in the hair, they're not really attached very well. The hair under it gets cleaned well. And so I saw physically, I guess I could testify, that when my sisters or women in my family went to shower, they wouldn't untie these things. And therefore, you're not likely to untie it on Shabbat, and therefore it's mutter. Okay? Says Gemara, well, either way, he's saying the same thing, that it's mutter. My ika ben hachlishna ben hachlishna, ika binayo titanifan. The difference between the rationale is, let's say you have this thing in your hair. Again, I don't know what an English word for it is, but it's called a tiki chalilta in Aramaic. But essentially it's a braid. It's a man-made braid that's hanging down from your hair. It's not necessarily made out of hair. It's made out of any material. Let's say it's filthy. Let's say it's really dirty. So you have a fake braid coming down your hair, but it's full of oil, right, or something spilled on it. I don't, James, to be honest with you, that word to me means the same thing as tichi chalilti. So I don't know what that means. Let's say it's dirty. So what does it matter? If you say that anywhere that's woven, meaning where it's woven, the water will get into it, then goes lo gazur. The chachamim were not gozer walking out on Shabbat. Hani nami arug. So here too, it's woven. But lahach lishna da amr mishum kepeda, according to the second language, where Rav Huna Breder of Yeshua said that this is not a problem because I saw my sisters going to take baths wearing this thing, then kivan de tanifin, since it's dirty, a woman's not going to want to take a bath with something dirty. Right? She's going to take it off so it doesn't get her clothing dirty, or not her clothing, her body dirty. So there, mikbid kapti alayo, there we would be makbid, and there if you had a dirty weave, as James put it, on Shabbat, dirty meaning messy, it has dirt in it, you couldn't go out with it. Because the reason is that if you were going to go take a bath, let's say you had to go to the mikvah on Shabbat, you would take it out. You wouldn't have to take it out because it's a chatzitza, because the water will get into this thing, but you would take it out because you don't want to step out of the mikvah and have this dirty thing dripping on your body. And so because of that, since if it was, therefore you take it out on Shabbat, the Chachamim made a gzera and said you shouldn't wear it. But if the reason is because of a chatzitza, because this is not a chatzitza, it's not a problem. And that's how Rashi explains it. Rashi brings another shot from his teachers, which he doesn't like so much, that has to do with a whole different concept. If you recall, we discussed in many places that the question of what's a chatzitza is very complex, right? So we've discussed before, Chulin we had it recently, I think. Maybe in Nida we had it, I don't remember. But that what's considered a chatzitza. So the Gemara says, generally the Mishnah says that it depends on whether it's touching most of your, let's say you have dirt on most of your body, or whether you have it on a small part of your body. We had it in Brachot, actually. I take it back. We just had it in Brachot. Okay, so, or if it's something that, if it's rubo velo makbid alav, so something is covering most of your body, but you don't care, right? Or if it's mi'ut u'makbid alav, if it's a small, even if it's touching one part of your body, but you are makbid, not, you care about it, you're going to wash it off. That's like, let's say you draw on yourself, right, with ink. Does that matter or not? So it depends on whether it's something you mind or not. And so anyways, Rashi thinks it's totally unrelated to that, and it's related to the question of whether you're going to take it out for getting yourself dirty or not getting yourself dirty. Continues the Gemara. While we're on this topic of what hair is considered a chatzitza for the mikvah, this is not hair. This is what attachment maybe, or what weave maybe that you sew into your hair is considered to be a chatzitza. So it's not hatam. So the Mishnah.
The weave is made of hair.
I'm sorry?
The weave is made of hair.
So none of this is made of hair yet. We're going to get there in a second. This is made of wool or linen so far.
Wool and linen.
Okay?
I see.
We're so far. And it's dyed, presumably, or not. I don't think these are meant to be, again, I don't know for sure, but I don't think they're meant to replace your hair. They're meant to be pretty. I mean, people walk around all the time with these.
Women wear these things all the time, even now.
Even men sometimes.
Not less, but.
Okay. Tanan Atam. Now the Mishnah says the following in Mikvaot. Elu chotzitzin ba'adam. The following things are chatzitza ba'adam. Rashi just points out that, we're saying humans, not aliens, but not kelim. Right? The previous program we're talking about chatzitza in a kli. These are chatzitza in humans. Adam. Chutei tzemer. One second. Before I do this, I want to just lay out the ground rules here. So. And people can verify. Again, this is a little bit. I don't know all these details, but the
No, but it's probably in our room.
The Mishnah discusses 3 different kinds of strands that you would make. One is tzemer, which is wool. One is pishtan, which is linen, I think, right? Flax.
Linen, yeah.
Right. What do you make linen out of? Flax.
Flax, yes.
Okay, and one is hair, human hair, sar, right? So the Mishnah assumes that the human hair is the hardest, the least absorbent of all of those things, followed by tzemer, by wool, followed by pishtan, followed by tzemer. So that wool is the most absorbent, and we call that, it's the weakest, it's kal, and the pishtan, and then human hair. And the issue here that we're trying to discuss is, let's say you tie something around another part of the body. How much is it likely to cause a chatzitza? So for example, let's say you tie a string, like a hard string around your finger. Is it more likely to be attached to the finger than if you tie a light string around your finger, right? And the fact here is not how heavy the string is in terms of weight, it's how absorbent the string is. And so the assumption is going to be that the more absorbent or the lighter something is, the less likely it is to be a chatzitza. Okay, so says the, and I think I said it wrong. Let me, let's read the Gemara and then we'll see. Okay. Okay, says the Gemara. You ready? This is a Mishnah. The following hair ties will be a chatzitza in a person. Chutei tzemer, if you tie strings of wool. Chutei pishtan, if you tie strings of pishtan, flax. V'harutzuah sheberoshei abanot. Now, rutzuot, we'll see what rutzuot are. We'll maybe see what they are later. And other things that you tie on the head of kids, of girls. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda continues in the Mishnah, Shel tzemer v'shel sar, right? Yes. That's how I'm translating kal. But we'll get there in the Gemara. Shel tzemer, if it's made out of wool, which I said is more absorbent, v'shel sar ein chotzitzin. Those do not cause a chatzitza. Nipnei shehamayim ba'im bahem, because water can get into them, which is what I'm calling absorbent, but I'm not sure if absorbent's the best word. But meaning they're not as dense, and so water gets under them. And so if you tie a thing made out of hair or made out of wool, which would cause it to be very similar, those are not chatzitza. But Rabbi Yehuda admits that if it's a pishtan, it is a chatzitza, because pishtan is thicker, and so not thicker. It's maybe denser, might be the right word, and therefore when you tie it around hair, it's more likely to cause a chatzitza. Now that's the Mishnah. Says Rav Huna, Amar Rav Huna, v'kulan b'rashei abanot sheninu. Everybody is talking about tying these on the head of somebody, of the girls. Now, as opposed to what? Amatkava Rav Yosef, what do you mean on the heads? Lamute mai. What are you adding, Rav Huna, by saying we're talking about the heads of these girls? Ilem lamute dit savar. So you're saying as opposed to putting it around the neck of them, right? If you're going to tie these strands of wool on the hair, it's a problem. But if you tie them around their necks, like a necklace, it's not a problem, right? And if you're telling me you're talking about tzemer, now here's where we get into the complicated thing, where the Mishnah said, in the Tanakhama said, that if you tie tzemer, right, wool, around a woman's head, it's a chatzitza. And Rabbi Yehuda said it's not a chatzitza. Says Rav Huna, that's only if it's on the head. But now we're understanding if it's around her neck, that it would be a chatzitza. Right? Says Gemara, it doesn't make any sense. Hashtarach al gabi kash. It would not be a chatzitza, only on the head, not around her neck. Says Gemara, it doesn't make any sense because hashtarach al gabi kashet. Now, rach means what's the word we use in English? Soft, maybe, which we're meaning the wool. On kashet, kashet means a human hair, which is hard. Is a chatzitza rach al gabi rach mi boy? Let's say you tie something soft onto your neck, which is soft, right? That certainly will be a chatzitza because it can go into the neck, right? So a hair, you're limited and it doesn't attach as firmly. But if you tie it around your neck, it should certainly be a chatzitza because the attachment basically goes against the skin and becomes firm. Ella, so it must be lemute chute pishtan. Maybe he's saying that, pishtan, which is a chatzitza according to everybody, is only a chatzitza on your head, but not on your neck. That doesn't make sense either. Hashta kasha, again, pishtan, al gabi kasha chotzetz, kasha al gabi rach, on your neck, miboy, el amar of Yosef, hainu tamid. So the Gemara, again, Tosfos is very bothered by all these assumptions, but that's the assumption the Gemara makes, is that the object that you're tying, the harder it is, the more likely it is to cause a chatzitza if the thing you're tying it to is either hard or soft, because it'll go into the skin, basically, and cause a chatzitza. Ella amar of Yosef, Hainu taima to Rav Huna, the reason that Rav Huna says that all these rules apply to your hair and not to your neck is not because it's harder to make a chatzitza around your neck. In fact, it's easier because your neck is soft. And so something you tie is more likely to be not attached, but against the skin. The reason that he says it's mutter is because most people, when they tie something around their neck, try to keep it a little bit loose because they don't want to choke themselves. And so the specific issue is not whether you could make it tight, it's that most intelligent people are not going to make it tight. And if they do make it tight, they won't be around for much. Right? No one wants to choke themselves. And so the assumption is that when you tie it around your neck, of course it could, meaning the assumption is around your finger, it could be tighter than around your hair because your finger will go into. But around your neck, you're not going to tie it very tightly. And that's why Rav Huna says that everything is mutter around your neck is like a choker. We're not literally choking. Eitvei Abaya. Ask the Abaya on this issue of around. We'll see what the question is. It says in the Braita, Habanot yotzot bechutin sheba'aznehem. Girls or women can go out with strings in their ears, right? Let's say you get your ears pierced and you don't have earrings in them for whatever reason, you have to keep the holes open. So they would put a little tiny string into the ear to keep the holes open. That's Rashi's understanding. It could also be decorative. And they can't go out with something, a choker around their neck. I don't understand. If you say a woman won't choke herself, so why why can't she go out with this, chabak around her neck? Ravina says, Ravina, hacha kitala askina. We're talking about a special kind of thing called a kitala, which sounds like something you're going to kill someone with, but that is not what Rashi says it means. Rashi says it's essentially a bib. It's something that they would put around their neck when they were eating so that their clothes would not get dirty, right? Because they were very concerned. And there is a concern that a woman will make it very tight in order to choke herself, not to kill herself, but because Isha choneket et atzma, a woman will make it very tight against her neck. Because if you think about it, if you make it really tight, you can accentuate her double chin. And so it would be very, it was very favorable in those times to be thought of as being as the Gemara puts it, a balat basar, right? Have a generous chin. And so because of that, there's a specific concern that in this case, the woman will tie it up tightly against her neck to accentuate her neck and her chins. And so I think things have changed a little bit today maybe, but at least back then, there was a concern that she would do that and that would end up being a chatzitza. So that's the concern. Got that, James?
We're talking about on Shabbat here, right?
We're talking about going out with it on Shabbat. Correct. And again, the reason is that it will be, because it's considered to be so tight to the skin, if she's going to go to a mikvah, she'll have to take it off. And once she takes it off, she might walk with it. So that's all the concern. These are all things that we're concerned that because they're tied to your skin, you're going to take them off on Shabbat.
But she's not going to a mikvah on Shabbat.
Can I ask you a question? Just like,
Shabbat, you can go to a mikvah. Yes, Alyssa.
Are we imagining her going to the mikvah like Friday night or Saturday night?
So Friday night, presumably.
Friday night. And also, is the hair attached to your body, is that ever considered a chatzitza or never if it's attached?
That's
like if it's like really matted or something, I don't know, like it doesn't let water through.
No. So it's a good question. So this is a very big debate, not a Shabbat debate, but the short answer is that knots might be concerning, right? And so people are often very makbid to get rid of knots because if you have a knot in your hair, then the water can't touch all the hair. But if the hair is very thick and the water doesn't get through it, it's usually not considered to be as concerning because that's the way you go. Meaning, it's as long as the woman's immersed in the mikvah or a man, if the man's going, and their whole body essentially could be exposed, even if they have very, very many layers, let's say, and it doesn't get somewhere, it doesn't. Whereas the Gemara puts it, you don't have to open your mouth and swallow the water. Let's put it that way. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So generally it's considered to be less of an issue. Of course, that maybe sociologically this is a much more complex issue, and this is one of the foundational things behind why some people cut their hair before the mikvah or shave their heads before the mikvah, which I think has evolved into many other things. But certainly this is somewhere where it comes from. But in general, the knots are considered to be a bigger issue than having thick hair, for that matter. But again, don't take any of this for halacha l'maisa. Continues the Gemara.
Usually now, women go to the mikvah on Friday night or on Shabbat. I mean, or this is the Gemara is, in the times of the Gemara that was more common, or I mean.
I think it's just as common today as always. People go to the mikvah on Shabbat.
On Shabbat.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
James, so if she's not going to the mikvah, could she go out with it?
No, so that's the whole point, is that they made a takana that she should never go out with these things. And again, all these takanot, they seem pretty far-fetched, but that she should never go out with it because we're worried about this one instance. And so it's exaggerated because of that, not even when she's not going to the mikvah, because, and again, I assume, I don't know this is a fact, that these things would probably stay in for a longer period of time, and therefore we don't want you to get used to wearing them and going out with them on Shabbat, so you have to take them out before Shabbat, essentially. Continue the Mishnah. Yehuda Omer, and this is not the Mishnah, this is the Mishnah on Mikvot still. Rabbi Yehuda says, Shel tzemer v'shel sar ein chotzitzin. You don't have to worry about wool or hair. That, again, these are fake. This is human hair that you put attached to your own hair. You don't have to worry because the water will get between them. Even though you tied it together, water can get in. Amar Rav Yosef, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, halacha Rav Yehuda b'chutei sar. Halacha is like Rav Yehuda with chutei sar. Says Gemara, that's why do you have to tell me halacha is like Rav Yehuda? No one argued with him, right? Tanakama only said semer and pishtin. So what's your chiddush that the halacha is like Rav Yehuda b'chutei sar? Amalei Abaya halacha mechlal depligi. When you say halacha, you're implying someone argues with him. Now maybe they do argue. Maybe he thought or heard that the Tanakama was talking about it's being usher, even if it's human hair or hair. Ihunami lo havi mairi. So then he wouldn't have said anything. Maybe the fact that Rabbi Yehuda opened up and said, "Oh, you're allowed to do chutei tzemer and chutei sar." Who mentioned chutei sar is not usher, was not mutter. It must be that he understood the Tanakama, so they were usher. That's not a proof, because Dilma kashem kamer. Maybe all Rabbi Yehuda is saying is the same way everybody agrees that you can go out, a woman can go out and go to the mikvah or go out on Shabbat with chutei sar attached to her hair, then odoli nami b'chutei tzemer. You should admit to me that the same thing is true about chutei tzemer. So I still don't understand why you had to paskin like Rabbi Yehuda. Everybody agrees. Itmar, Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Shmuel, modim chachamim the Rabbi Yehuda b'chutei sar. In fact, that's exactly what he said when he repeated it. Don't say the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. No one disagrees. Say everybody agrees. It's Rabbi Yehuda b'chutei sar. Tanya nami hachi. In fact, there's a brayta which supports this. The brayta says chutei tzemer, chotzitzin. Chutei tzemer, the strands of wool are chotzetz. Chutei sar, ein chotzitzin. That's a Tanakama. And Rabbi Yehuda omer, shel tzemer, v'shel sar, ein chotzitzin. And so that supports that sort of way of saying it. That Rabbi Yehuda is not arguing, but he's trying to say, just like everybody agrees about chutei sar, everyone should agree about chutei tzemer, that it's not a chatzitza. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, matnita nami deka. Our Mishnah also seems to imply, because our Mishnah says, and this is a later Mishnah in this parak, the Ketani, Yotzat isha b'chutei sar, a woman can go out on Shabbat wearing a weave, as James put it, chutei sar, hair tied to her hair, bein mishala, are my words? Yeah, whether it's hers, bein mishal chaverta. Whether it's her own hair or it's someone else's hair, hair tied to hair is not considered, human hair tied to her hair is not considered a chatzitza, and therefore she can go out with it. So what's the proof from there? Who is that? Money. Ilim Rabbi Yehuda. If that Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda, why tell me you can go out with human hair? Afilu chutei tzemer nami. Rabbi Yehuda would permit you to go out even with hair from wool. Elav Rabbanan. It must be the Rabbanan who prohibit wool. But shmamina b'chutei sar lo pligi shmamina. You see that they only say that about wool, but they don't disagree about human hair. So again, it depends. So it's more complicated. I agree with you, James. I was not trying to get there, but knots depend. So you can imagine that if you take a knot, you sometimes can have things that are tighter in a knot than something that's tied together. Everyone's done it, right? You take two shoes, you tie them together, you can undo that. But you make one knot in the shoe and it's impossible to come out, right? In a string. So that's the concern. So not all knots are prohibited. If water can get in, it's okay. But people are very try to be careful about this, but it's true. As long as it's something that's tied together, it has nothing to do with that at all. No, it has to do with chatzitza. It has to do with whether the water can get into the space, whether it's waterproof or not waterproof. Continues the Mishnah, lo b'totefet. A woman should not go out with a totefet. My totefet, and if someone has English here, some of these things I don't really know what they are in English, but I'll try my best. What is a totefet? Amar Rav Yosef, Chumrata de katifta. It's a tie that's made of katifta. Rashi says it's meant to ward off the ayin hara. So it was some medicinal thing. You wrap this thing around your head and you were free from corona. Sounds like a mask maybe, but that's not what it was. Right? It was on your head. Amalei Abaya says Abai, why is that usher then? We're going to see later in the parak that if you have a kamiyah is, everyone knows what a kamiyah is, I think, right? A charm kind of thing. That is mumcha, which the Gemara says means it's been made by an expert in kamiyah, a real witch doctor. Then you're allowed to wear it on Shabbat. because, and we can discuss this later in the parak, but you're not going to take it off. That's why you're allowed to wear it. So, because you want to keep it on. So why don't you say this thing is also mutar? You're right. It can't be that. If it was for health, you would keep it on. So it must be referring to an apuzaina. An apuzaina. I have no idea what apuzaina is. Rashi says, a kishud. He says on the bottom here, it's some decorative thing that you put on your forehead, not puzaina. Tayanami hachi, and we learn like this in a braita. Yotza isha b'sivacha muzhavet. The woman can go out with a sivacha, is like a cap, like a hat that has gold on it. Ubit totefet, ubit sarbitina kovinba. You can have, if you have a totefet or a sarbitin that's tied to the hat, a woman can go out with it. The reason being that she's not going to take off her hat in public on anywhere, right? So if she's not going to take off her hat, you don't have to worry, she's going to take this off and carry it. And so as long as they're tied, they're kavua, they're attached to the hat, it's okay. And says the Braita, Ezu totefet ve'ezu sarbitin, Amar bevua totefet is mukefet la mi'ozen la'ozen, sarbitin magian la'ad l'chaya. One goes from ear to ear and one goes from front to back, basically, to the cheeks. Well, not front to back, I'm sorry. One goes, think about it, one goes from ear to ear and one extends over the ear down to your cheeks, right? So they're just different kinds of straps, basically, that you would attach on top of your hair or on top of your hat, like a band. That looks beautiful, that's gold, right? It looks nice. So if it's attached to the hat, you're allowed to go out with it on Shabbat. The reason being that you're not going to take your hat off on Shabbat because you're not going to expose your hair in public. Amar Rav Huna, I think that's what I'm about to. Aniyot osinotan shalminit sivonim. Women who were poor would make these out of dyed wool, let's say, to look good, right? And ashirot osinotan shel kesef or shel zahav. If you were rich and you could afford it, you would make a silver band or a gold band. But even if you couldn't afford it, you would make it out of some dyed cloth. Okay, so that was a decorative thing in that time. Lo b'kavul. Now, what's a kavul? You can't go out with a kavul. Amar Rav Yanai, kavul ze'ani yodea mahu. I don't know what it is. I don't know. What does it mean? I don't know what it is. I mean, it could be several things. It could be a kavla da'avda. A kavla da'avda is like a mark that an eved would have, right? So a slave in those times, like people today, unfortunately, would wear a pin that would say property of so-and-so or, so-and-so management company kind of thing. So it was proof to everyone that this person was the property or worked for a certain place, a certain person. So I don't know if it's that, or if it's a kippah shel tzemer, right? Or it's a kippah shel tzemer is a little hat of wool. So Rashi says that, and again, this is beyond my expertise, that often when they would wear a hat, a woman would wear a hat, they would first put a kippah on top first, maybe to put their hair together before they put the hat on top of it. So this is like an under hat, basically, a kippah, underneath their bigger hat. So it says, Rav Yanai, I'm not sure which one it is. If it's kavla da'avda, if it's the mark of the servant, it's not, and again, it's not a mark, it's like a patch. Aval kippah shel tzemer shaper dami, but the kippah would be okay because the kippah, remember, on her head is under her hat. So she's unlikely to take that off. Or odilma, now the slave, of course, is going to take off their mark because they might be embarrassed, right? Let's say they go out in public, their master's not around, they'll take off this thing so that no one knows that they're a slave. Odilma, maybe it's kippah shel tzemer tznan, maybe the Mishnah is saying you also can't go out with this kippah shel tzemer. Again, it's not your main hat, so maybe she'll take it off because she still has a hat on top of it. The kol shekain kavla da'avda, and then certainly the patch that the slave wears, he might take off. Amar Rabavo, mistaver kaman nemer shel kippah shel tzemer tznan. In fact, it makes more sense that what we're saying you're not allowed to go out with is a kippah shel tzemer. The Tanya nami hachi, in fact, the Mishnah, the Braita says it's preferish. Yotza isha b'kavul b'istima l'chatzer. A woman can go out with the kavul and an istima into the chatzer. We'll see what an istima is later. Reb Shimon ben Elazar Omer af b'kavul reshut harabim. That in fact, not only can she go out to the chatzer, but she can wear this kavul. Remember, a kavul is an under hat now into a reshut harabim. And klal Omer Reb Shimon ben Elazar kol shudamata ben shivcha shivvacha. Anything that's below her hat, or anything she wears on her head below her hat, yotzimbo. You can go out with it because you're not going to take off your hat to expose this thing and to carry it. And so you see from here that this is something you wear on your head, not something that you wear a patch on your shoulder or something like that. So we're referring to your hat. My istima, now what's this istima that we mentioned? Amar Rabbi Avo, bizyoni. It's a bizyoni. What's a bizyoni? My bizyoni. Amar Abaya, Rav Kalya Porchi. Sorry, Amar Abaya, Amar Rav, sorry. Kalya Porchi. It's referring to a very small hat. Kalya Parchi, Rashi says a beautiful thing. Parchi means fly away. So after a woman did her hair, as everyone knows, even I know this because I have daughters, once you do the bow, you always have some hair that you do a braid, and there's some hair left behind that slipped out of the braid that's flying out. So what they would do is they would have like a second hat that for the flying away hairs, for the loose hairs. And so they would cover it, maybe a braid or like a little cover. So it would be a second flyaways. Exactly. That's what parachi means. Korea, right? So you would have a second a hat or a cover for the hairs that escaped the braid. And so that's something which you can wear on Shabbat because you're not going to take it off again.
I think it's called a net. I think it's called a net.
Okay, net sounds good. I'll take that. I'll accept any definitions here that I don't know what I'm talking about. Taner Rabbana, let's do a few more lines. They said three things about this hairnet. Ein ba mishum klayim. You don't have to worry about klayim with it. Rashi explains because the way it was made, it was woven in a way that wasn't attached together very well. And so even if you have some threads that are wool and some threads that are linen, because they're not knotted together very well, it's not considered klayim because they're not considered to be really attached to each other. And therefore it doesn't become tomei utzarat because klayim and tzarat are connected. And ein yotzei bo reshut rabim, you can't go out with it on Shabbat to reshut rabim. And mishum Reb Shimon amru, af ein bo mishum atarat klayot atarot kalot. Sorry. You also don't have to worry about the gezerah of atarot kalot, as we learned elsewhere. We learned in Sota, Rashi says, I thought it was Gittin, but I guess it's in both, that when they made a takana, it is in Sota, they made a takana that after the Churban Abayit, a woman should not wear a crown when she gets married. They made a takana. Usually women who got married, even today I guess, would wear a crown, and they made a takana not to wear that. And so says Rabbi Yehuda, this does not fall into the takana because it's not so elaborate, it's not so nice. And so therefore this is excluded from that halacha. Okay, and we'll stop here with the net that we're up to. And we'll get to another pshat tomorrow morning at 7:30, God willing.
Why can't they be with the takana, why? Why they cannot have the takana of the atara? Why?
So they made it as a memory of the Churban of the Beit HaMikdash, of destruction of the temple. So it's in the there's a whole list of things in Marcus and Sota that Misha Charvu Beit HaMikdash, once the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, they made a takana not to wear a thing of gold, not to finish your house, right? All these things that we know about. This is one of them, that a woman who gets married, a kala, should not wear an elaborate atara, a crown.
Okay, thanks.
So, like many of the takanot, some we do more than others, I would say. One of them is that you're not supposed to listen to music, right? The cliché. So obviously that one we have some leniencies on. But certainly there are. Part of the reason that we break a glass at a wedding is to remember that even this time that we're most happy that we have these takanot that we're supposed to be zecher the churban.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Doesn't it disagree with the previous statement that you can go out with it?
So there's a machloka, we said. So it's a disagreement. Rabbi Yehuda says you can, and Tanakama says you cannot.
Does the Tanakama say why?
Again, it's all, maybe you'll take it off and carry it. So a lot of it depends on what human nature is and what's considered to be acceptable.
You can take off your hat and then take off this undercap.
No, this is separate from the hat. You won't take off your main hat, but I guess the question is, will you take off this what do we call it again?
Net.
The net that you put underneath. So again, you have a hat, not necessarily a hat, right? You braid your hair up and cover it, let's say, but there's some hair that's escaping. So you put a separate cover, a separate net over that hair.
Catch them.
Would that separate net would be something you would take off?
Fly away.
This would go over the cap or under the cap?
Not under the cap. It's not under the cap. It's either on top of the cap or it's in addition to the cap.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
Tomorrow morning, 7:30, everyone. God bless. Shavua tov.
Thank you. Shavua tov.
Shabbat tov. Thank you.